Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Yana Johnson, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Lieutenant Commander Jodie Brown. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool reflection by visitors to the memorial. Please stand and join in singing the national anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which he remained true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard their record, which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Frederick Sanders. Frederick Sanders was born in Queensland on the 25th of February 1893 to Harold and Catherine Sanders. His mother died when he was 2 years old and his father returned to England with the 4 children. Frederick attended the Roman Catholic school in Chidiock, Dorset. Harold Sanders later remarried and eventually returned to Australia with his family, taking up 27 acres at Maribyrn, near Mildura in Victoria. After experimenting with pig raising and dairy cows, he settled on fruit growing. Harold Sanders was a thoughtful farmer and passed his interest on to his son Frederick, who became a horticulturalist. Frederick Sanders enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force in September 1914, several weeks after the outbreak of war. Unlike early departures of recruits from Mildura, Sanders' group of 6 or 7 enlistees left quietly one evening on the train to Melbourne. On his arrival in Melbourne, Sanders passed the medical exam and began his military training before leaving with the 1st contingent for overseas service. After a further period of training and preparation in Egypt, the 7th Battalion landed on Gallipoli on the 25th of April of 1915. An advance party from the battalion landed at 5 a.m, but the remainder, including Private Sanders, landed at 4 p.m. The following day, Private Sanders disappeared. His family was first notified he was missing in June 1915, and although his father waited anxiously for more news, for months he heard nothing. Despite investigations, there seemed to be no witnesses to what had happened to Private Frederick Sanders. In mid-November 1915, a month before the Australians were withdrawn from Gallipoli, the 26th Battalion was holding trenches at Russell's Top at Anzac. An enemy stick bomb came over and blew away a portion of the parapet, revealing the body of an Australian soldier. The paybook and diary in his pocket proved that the man was Private Frederick Sanders. The diary revealed that Sanders had landed at 4 p.m. on the 25th of April 1915. His company came under heavy fire and only 20 went unwounded. During that day, they were under machine gun and shrapnel fire that cut them off from the rest of their battalion. But they were able to reach their outposts under cover of darkness. Sanders began an entry for the 26th of April, writing, "Went into the trenches with New Zealand troops," and there the diary ended. He had evidently been killed shortly afterwards. Sanders' diary and papers were sent home to his father, along with a photograph of Frederick that had been in his pocket. His buried was buried in Shrapnel Valley Cemetery, where it lies today under the words, "For God, King and Country, rest in peace." Frederick Sanders was 22 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Frederick Sanders, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and the hope of a better world. They shall grow not old, as we who are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. lest we forget.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they'll be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. Thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and we wish you a very good evening.